Good morning, everybody. I'm Sue, and to my left is my friend Susan, and we today are going to be discussing the purpose of public schools, what they are, why we need them.
Do we need them? No, I'm kidding.
Of
Of course we need them.
Of course we need them.
So thanks for bringing us into everybody's living room, phone, subway, wherever you're listening to us from. We're happy to be with you. And for some of you, it might be afternoon by now. You had a thought? No thoughts today?
Zero.
Okay. So as you can tell, we're in a little bit of a funny mood today, but really the topic we want to talk to you about is pretty serious. And it's the purpose of public schools in the United States. Why do we choose to have public schools? What's the purpose of them? Are they still necessary? Do they benefit communities? Do they benefit our children? And I think, just to qualify all of that, Sue and I both agree, and she can disagree if she chooses to, but public schools we think are vital to our communities. We think that it is really incredibly important that we have high quality public education for all of our children, that it's free to families so that everybody has an equal opportunity to have their children be educated and have the doors open for them as they move into their adult life. And we all know that the education is something, when it's given to you, when you are able to access it and it's meaningful, nobody can ever take that away from you. It is such a valuable foundation for our kids to learn to read, to learn to write, to learn math, to have those foundation skills, make those connections so that as they exit our school system and they go off to, run our companies, run our country, provide services in our community, that they're well educated and that they're capable. And so we all benefit when our children have a high quality education. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Oh, what's that? You hear that?
Nope.
Feedback?
Are you having feedback again?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just so you know, guys, we're having a little technical growing pains as we get this podcast launched. So if you hear Sue in stereo, we know that we're having a little bit of feedback with audio.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most basic critical needs are reading and doing math. It's fundamental. If you can't read, you're limited in so many capacities, and they're just critical areas. And how we do it here is from K to 3. That's our years for teaching kids to read. And then moving forward, they are expected to be able to read to learn. And then the whole curriculum changes for reading and math, because then word problems start in math, and you've got to be able to read to be able to do the word problems, to be able to calculate the math, to make it real life applicable. So those critical years of instruction are imperative and fundamental for lifelong learners.
And making sure, if we get children that make it to 3rd grade and they're still struggling with those foundational skills, that we have the programs and the people and the resources in place in order to support learners that are still struggling once they've been through that K-3 time of their life. Right. There's not a lot of evidence out there to support retention as a way to improve learning, although we certainly don't want kids just passed along. If we have a student who isn't meeting standards in a grade level, we need to plan. We need resources. We need educators that can help them fill in whatever gaps that are being, that are showing.
Right. Retention, repeating here and doing more of the same that hasn't been working is absolutely ineffective. And So again, when we dig deeper into all of that and talk about what the statutes say and what the curriculum says and what the IEP teams do and all that kind of stuff. But back to public education, I didn't mean to twist us. Um, I think
It's okay. Just
I,
don't start doing the twist.
I think um, what we talk about is the funding of the public education system. And that's where I think we are going to go next and talk
You
about.
always want to go there
Thank you.
because it's your thing. But just to talk about the purpose of public education is to make sure we are creating productive citizens, productive members of our community, people who have skills for the jobs that are coming in the future. And we know that children that don't get a solid education, their pathways are very limited. Their economic outcomes are diminished. And often when we look at who is filling our jails, it's kids who didn't learn how to read and who didn't have supports in school. And
Well, yeah, and kids that aren't successful even when they go to post-secondary. And we're hearing this for years. We've been hearing this. The kids are, they might have gotten great grades in elementary, middle, high school. They graduated, but they are not ready to be successful in a post-secondary environment because there's gaps in their knowledge.
and we are that's even the professors. I mean, there's articles that are being put out currently by professors that are saying, especially these kids who went through COVID years, although this is a problem we've seen for years, it's been exacerbated by those gaps in those learning years, and that they're coming into post-secondary without having the not just the foundational skills, but also the critical thinking, knowing how to take information that they go and source from different places and then draw conclusions and use that information. And they're even talking about that they can't assign 30 or 40 pages of reading in a night because it's too much for these students to do that level of reading and get and glean the information out of it and then be able to use that information to do other things. And so we know
Well,
we
yeah, and along with that, it's the behavioral needs that these kids are having because we hear it all the time when middle school parents or high school parents get to us for help with their students, oftentimes it's behavioral, but when you drill down to it, these kids can't read. So in elementary school, they're okay, but by the time they get to middle school, they'd rather be the bad kid than the dumb kid. So they're going to get out of their seat and go to the bathroom, or they're going to behave in some kind of way. So they are not going to get called on to read aloud or answer a question. And those kids kind of find each other quickly.
Yep.
And it's a very, very vicious cycle. So we'll talk about that also in a different podcast. But right now, to bring us back, I think what our message to you is the importance of public schools and the importance of your part in being part of the public school community and really knowing what some of these things mean, how they got to where they are, what they mean. When you look at your students' report card, dig a little deeper, figure out what comprises that A grade. Or oftentimes we'll go to meetings with parents and it'll be, oh, little Johnny is doing so much better. He's made so much progress. Well, you got to figure out what that means because every parent wants to hear that and you want to hang on to that. But if you don't know, that means he's still a grade level behind in reading, but he's made progress. You're never going to be able to catch him up to get him where he needs to be successful. So the details matter.
Yeah. Did they take the same test over?
Mm-hmm.
And the grade improved? And we do want grades to improve. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with reteaching and retesting, but understanding if that's a pattern and your student consistently needs to retake test, then are they struggling to get the information as quickly as their peers?
Right.
Or are they struggling taking the test? Or like, why is that happening? So not necessarily that the practice is wrong, but understanding that what does the data tell you and how does that guide how we help our kids?
And what does the data mean? What is the data? If you're getting pulled into small group, what are they doing in that small group? Is it more of the same that they weren't understanding in the total class instruction? And then are you doing more of the same in small group? And then do you do even more of it one-on-one to determine that that's not how this child learns? You know, is it pictures? Are you giving visuals? So you know what a caterpillar is, but you're not reading the word caterpillar. It's all of that stuff that becomes so significant as children are navigating through elementary school.
And as Sue said, in future podcasts, we're going to really delve into reading and special education and learning disabilities and how we, the system educates our children. But to circle back to, so we have this big public school system, and here locally, because again, we always are going to come back to, we live in Sarasota, Florida, and we have been intimately involved in our school district, our public schools here. Sue and I've lived in this community since the early 2000s. And so we have been at school board meetings and sat on district level committees and had our children go through the public schools. And, our kids sometimes were having phenomenal experiences and sometimes we had struggles, but we can proudly say we had four kids between us and they all four graduated. And they all four have moved on into their adult lives. And, but being present and being parents and now being community members that care about our schools and pay attention to what's going on in our schools, we feel has been a vital part of raising our children. And now a vital part of just being citizens that live in Sarasota County and caring about the value that our public schools bring to our community and making sure that the role the citizen has or the resident here in Sarasota has in what is our role with the public school system and how do we fulfill that. And that's part of what we want to talk about today is there are a lot of stakeholders or partners in public education. So certainly, we have our district and school employees who, and I think in Sarasota, we're right around 5,000 employees. Is that still accurate, Sue?
I don't know. I think when we talk about budget, we can talk more about that.
But, we're one of the biggest employers in our county is the county school system.
Yes.
And we have an elected school board. We have 5 school board members who were elected. They serve a term of 4 years. And their job is to hire the superintendent and to set policy and to make sure that our budget is aligned. They approve the budget and they make sure that it is aligned with the priorities that they've set with the superintendent and that follow the legislative mandates and the policies that the school board has approved.
So our school board members are districted to an area, but it is a countywide election for each district. So different than our county commissioners are now, where it's a district and that district votes for that commissioner. So I think that's an important note as we talk about things going forward.
Right. So no, if you live anywhere in Sarasota County, if any one of the 5 board members is up for re-election, you will be voting for that person or those people. And it rotates. So one cycle we have 2 people that are up for election and the next cycle we have 3. And it's rotating 4-year terms that our board members have. And again, they are supposed to represent the citizens in the district that they live in. And even though the whole county votes for them. And
but I don't know that I've ever heard a board member say, I'm not going to respond or answer because you're not in my district. I don't think I've ever heard anything like that, but different reasons they don't respond, but not that one.
No, but I'm just saying that if you live in, and that's your member, and you want to petition them because something is wrong, or you think something is going really well and you wanted to continue, you have a person that represents the area where you live.
And they could easily navigate you to where you need to be to get whatever help or answer you're looking for.
Yes. And then the other stakeholders that we have, so we have teachers, we have, all the staff that works in the schools. I would certainly say parents are stakeholders, and, they help support our schools as far as they volunteer. They usually donate money through various fundraising opportunities. They interact and partner with their classroom teacher, hopefully. One of the segments that I think we'd like to talk about is parent involvement. What is parent involvement? What should it be? What has it been in the past? Is it still that? I know parent rights is a hot topic in Florida, and we will maybe touch on that. But for me, parent involvement is about not just showing up at the school, but being welcomed as a partner on campuses, welcomed to help support your child's classroom, welcome to understand the policy decisions that are being made and how do parents have a voice in policy level decisions. So I think that that's a whole deep topic that we can get into in a future episode. The students are stakeholders, especially as they get into the secondary level. We have, we want the student voice. I think that what we offer in education, the students are having to receive it and participate in it. And so certainly getting their feedback about what is working well for them and what isn't is something we need to consider as a school system. And then we have the citizens' role. What do citizens who live in the county, who don't necessarily have children in the schools, they're not employees of the school district, what is the role of the citizen in public schools? Sue, do you have thoughts on that? What the citizen's role is?
Well, I think it's twofold or multifaceted, but I can remember years ago, starting when my kids were little, at Inglewood Elementary, and I was one of the volunteer coordinators at Inglewood Elementary, and that was one of the things that we did was recruit citizens from the community. And in Sarasota, we are so fortunate because we have a amazing, robust, talented retiree community, and they want to be involved and they want to help. And so we partnered with our local paper at the time, and we had meet and greets for people to come in, and they would volunteer and they would help with reading. I mean, we had remember, Susan, we had meetings with Harvard professors, and we had really a lot of people that wanted to be involved and be welcomed. And there was a period in Sarasota where they were welcomed. And there was very, very different than how things are today as far as going into the schools and volunteering, and that's another podcast for another day. But yeah, that's one of their roles. Their roles are to support the schools, to be welcome, to participate if they so choose, to use their talents and work with teachers and students and staff, and so much opportunity for people to be involved, along with funding sources. Our taxes fund our public schools. So everyone pays taxes, everyone pays property taxes. And since, was it 2000 or 2002
maybe?
Yeah, we had a referendum vote. And what that is in Sarasota is an additional $1 on your property taxes. And what it was additional taxpayer money slotted to the schools. Each referendum year, there was different
priorities.
Yeah, and different things that they said that they were going to use that dollar amount for. The only thing that I can think of that's been consistent has been the additional half hour of time, instructional time. So part of the teacher's pay for an additional half hour each day is funded by the referendum. And we have specific details and facts that we can get into and show you. But this vote consistently had been in a special election every 4 years. And most recently, the legislators have changed that, and they have said, for whatever reason, lots of differing opinions on this, that the referendum vote has to be held in a general election. So, for the first time ever in Sarasota this November, we are going to have a referendum vote in a general election where everybody, I'm sure this election year, lots of people are coming out and voting. But the referendum we have in place will be in place for 2 more years, regardless of what happens in the November vote, because this is the only general election. This will be the general election that occurs prior to the current
The current one expiring.
Yes. So that's happening in November, and the campaign for the referendum is starting now. So that's something we will dig into in a different podcast as well. But the referendum has its separate budget, and along with the other budget of the school district, the operation budget, the general budget, all the funding sources.
And so citizens understanding, what does the referendum fund? Why are citizens being asked to approve it? And it's an extra $1 million on our property taxes. And correct?
Yes, it is. And so this year, I think the referendum is slotted for this year, the next school year, to make over $100 million extra dollars in our school district budget, which is an awful lot of money because we've had a huge property growth and value in Sarasota.
Right. So people who don't understand how property taxes work, maybe the higher the value of your property, the more taxes that are collected. So say your property was worth, $100,000 back in the day. There used to be properties valued at that in Sarasota, and that you would pay 1% of that in this extra referendum amount. Well, if suddenly your $100,000 house is worth $250,000, then you're going to pay 1% of $250,000. So as the value of our properties in the county continue to go up, the amount of tax dollars that are coming in to pay for whatever we decide our tax dollars go for, that revenue source continues to increase.
Right. So that's what we were talking about a minute ago. The school board sets the budget and approves the budget each year. And what is in this budget should be priority needs for money that you are certain to have. So the per pupil money, the all the other monies that go into the budget is one piece of that pie, but the referendum dollars is a huge bucket of money, but it's also potentially not going to be there if the voters vote that down. So I think looking at the budget, understanding what the school district's priorities are and what the school board's priorities are, it's kind of like listen to what they say, but trust but verify. Because a lot of times people will say, this is what we're doing, but then when you look at something, it's like, no, it maybe isn't what they're doing. So that's why it's important to dig a little deeper.
So in future episodes, we really want to look at our local budget, if we can get a copy of it, and where are our dollars being spent? Where are those dollars coming from? Because there's a variety of funding sources that school districts get. And are the dollars that we're spending aligning to student achievement? Are we seeing that our children are being successful, that the dollars we're spending are helping our kids to be able to read and write and do math and be healthy citizens? We talked a little bit about the impacts of not learning well and how that impacts a child's mental health. And so there's all different kinds of education, foundational skills, and then supports that we need to make sure that are in place for our children in our schools. And we, citizens should be watching to make sure that where we're spending our money is supporting the things that we think are important for our kids. And so I think one of the things the role of citizens, circling back to that, is how do we put checks and balances in place to make sure that this really big system, because remember, we're all about systems here at Binders and Clips. And so how does the school system that has thousands of employees, serves, 40 plus thousand students, has, I don't know how many campuses we have now, over 50 schools. No?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I think we are over 50 schools. And
I know, but I want to circle back to your number of students, because that's another podcast that we need to talk about, because the number of students also is something that we can discuss. How many students are actually being served in our public school, and what has enrollment looked like over?
Absolutely. We're going to dig into enrollment, but for general purposes, we're right around 40 plus or minus. I just want people who don't know Sarasota County to understand we have a $1.8 billion budget that serves tens of thousands of students. And we have, the biggest employer in the county, as far as employees go. And so the role of citizens is to help make sure that there are checks and balances in place, that the dollars that we have that are, taxpayer funded dollars, whether they come from federal taxes or state taxes or local taxes or extra local taxes, that they're being aligned to the priorities of making sure our children are well educated. And part of the way that citizens can help with the checks and balances is by watching school board meetings, by attending school board meetings, by offering public comment at school board meetings, by writing to your school board members. If there's a hot topic and you have an opinion or you have a question, you should be contacting your board members and letting them know that you care about this. Whether you're happy about it or you have questions about it or you're unhappy about it, it's really important that they hear from citizens, because that should help drive the policy and how we're aligning things.
And that will start. I can remember how many in the past we would unite parents, typically ESE parents, and we'd show up at a school board meeting and we would talk to the board members, and they would want to try to tell us that we were the vocal minority. So remember, when they don't like something that they're hearing, you become the vocal minority. But parents en masse and citizens en masse are powerful, and uniting them, and along with speaking at meetings, public records, that's huge. To if you want to see a budget, email them and ask for a budget, because I can tell you the statute, again, in another podcast we'll talk about the statute that says the budgets that people should be able to see, the taxpayer budgets, the detailed complete budgets, as opposed to maybe pieces of budgets that appear on websites and are convoluted between what's funded by a referendum and what's funded, which would potentially be disappearing, and what's funded by recurring dollars. So all of that is extremely important to understand, and how that funnels down to your child's classroom. So seeing what is the school budget that is this year for the number of kids that are there, as opposed to what it was last year, so you can make decisions. Some schools have multiple speech language pathologists, others don't. I mean, things like that are important if you've got a child who learns differently or needs different supports. So all of that is very important to understand, in my opinion.
And there's lots of data that schools collect, and it's not necessarily all on the website, but there are public records that are available. If there's a topic as a citizen that's your passion and you really want to know what's going on, in Sarasota County, we have something called Just FOIA, FOIA. And it is a way that citizens can go on the school board website, they can put in a request for a public record. And in Florida, we have very broad public records laws. We call it the sunshine because we're the sunshine state. And so we have sunshine laws. Things should be transparent in government. You should, if you want to know about something, it shouldn't be hard for you to get information about it. Whoever is the custodian of the record by law should be able to produce it if a citizen asks for it. And I'm sure in one of these episodes, we'll talk in depth about public records, because we have found over the years what is said and what is real aren't always the same thing. And sometimes what is talked about is somebody's opinion about the facts and not necessarily the facts themselves. And so public records helps citizens get the facts and in writing, and it gives you hopefully some real information to help guide your decisions and in the voting booth, in making decisions for your child and what school they go to, and knowing maybe we identify something that the school district thinks is a priority that our kids need. There isn't necessarily a funding source for it, but volunteers could help fill that gap, and you have that expertise. And so that's something you want to offer the school district. Like, there's all different reasons why information should help guide what we're doing as a community. And so we really encourage you that if there's something you want to know more about, there's a very easy way to get public records. Well, there's a very easy process. Getting the records isn't always very easy.
Right. And the law says you should be able to ask anybody who's the holder of the record and receive it, but it's become very, that's another history timeline we could talk about. Is, used to be emails in Sarasota were kind of like our county commissioner emails. When you emailed the board member, there was a place you could go and you could see all the emails and all the responses. And then it turned into a FERPA issue, and that was what they
What's
made.
FERPA, Sue?
It's privacy laws for children. So they said, oh, this information, we're talking about children, even though it was redacted. They redacted all the confidential information anyways, but they turned it into, oh, we've got to stop this because we don't want people's privacy to be violated. So there's always reasons why things disappear. And that's one of the things that disappeared. And all of that used to be public, but now you could certainly send an email and ask for all of the emails by and between, your teacher and the principal, or that include your child's name. That would, get information if you'd like to see that. But again, it used to be an easy process, and now it's just layers of different procedures that you have to follow, and more time that it takes to get the records. But you get them if you're persistent.
And then I would say one of the other ways that there are checks and balances is just legislative oversight. Committees that are formed here locally. I think we only have 2 standing committees that are citizens that serve the school. The school board has established committees. It's a financial advisory committee and an audit selection committee. And so in the past, I know we had a FACET, Family and Community Engagement Team, that was a committee the school board had set up. We used to have the Exceptional Student Advisory Council. So over the course of years here locally, we've had a variety of citizen committees that reported either to someone in the district or reported directly to the school board. And it was, again, trying to get more stakeholder input into the decision-making process. So I would encourage anybody that's watching this, if you're interested in your local schools, find out what committees does your local school district have And is it something you're interested in? I know when I moved here from out of state, I was interested in legislative affairs because I really felt like understanding the laws that govern education would help me get involved with my kids. And so there was a legislative committee that Sarasota County had at that time, and I volunteered to be part of that. And we really looked at all the laws that were being proposed in the Capitol for a given session. How were they going to impact public schools? And did it make sense for us to support those, or should we be lobbying against those laws? And, were they good for our kids? Were they good for our teachers? Were they going to make things harder for us? So that was something there, I don't know, there were district people on that committee, there were school board members on that committee, there were citizens and parents on that committee. And we really worked as a team to try to make sure that the legislative process was being influenced in the best interest of our kids. So, variety of things that happen in different local school districts.
And also your committees at your schools get involved. Can you hear that feedback? Committees at your schools you can get involved in. SAC is one, and some are legislatively mandated and others aren't. But it's back to it's more than just the bake sale. It's more than just making cookies and donuts and cupcakes and raising money. To be involved and really understand the inner workings of a school and how it got there and how it's morphed into being what it is today. So those are things we'll talk about also in future podcasts.
Yeah. So as you can see, it is an involved process to navigate through a school system, and to make sure that your local school system is actually doing the job that it's supposed to be doing of educating our children and preparing them to be productive members of our community. In some places, people that were watching this, you might have, like, your town has its own school system, and so it's small, and you might know the superintendent personally, and everybody, the 200 people that live in your town, all show up for school board meetings because it's that tiny. And then there's counties like ours that are pretty big, and we have 5 board members, and we serve tens of thousands of kids, and on lots of huge budget. And the further away we get from that intimacy of knowing the superintendent to, you may have never even seen the superintendent in Sarasota County if you don't pay attention to school stuff. You know what I mean? Like, lots of citizens in our community may not know the superintendent. They may not know school board members necessarily. But that's why it's even more important in a big system that there is citizen involvement and citizen oversight and input. And so I think the message we'd like to leave you with today is pay attention. If there's something that is your passion topic, none of us can pay attention to everything. All of us have things that become our high areas of interest. For me, my life for, I don't know, since 1998, when my first child got an IEP, an individual education plan, has been special education. And then from there, more broadly, how do all these other things that happen in a school system impact my child who has special needs? Because they're a student first, and then they have, even more needs that they had. But if I didn't understand how the whole system worked, I didn't know how to get my child what they needed individually. And how do those two things intersect? And so it was a personal mission that became broader for me to say public schools are important. If it weren't for public schools, my kids might not have an education. They might not have had an environment where they could be educated. And so paying attention and having a voice and making sure that the parent input was provided has become part of my life's mission over all of these years. And so again, it might be that you have a gifted kid, it might be that you have a kid that's in band, it might be that you have whatever your passion area is. If you pay attention to that and somebody else is paying attention to some other piece of this, collectively there's then checks and balances in place for this huge system, to make sure we don't get out of balance.
100% agree. And paying attention and getting involved. It's so many people getting through the day is all you can do. And especially when you're raising little ones, or, you know, whatever the age, you're busy with different things at different areas of life. But we've had so many people move to this community, and they're moved to this community because when you look at some of the things about the ratings of school systems or the quality of life or whatever's happened post-COVID and pre-COVID, but understanding the details of the inner workings of the school system and knowing your rights, basically, of what you can do and how you can work together to educate your child, it's absolutely imperative.
So thank you for joining us on Binders and Clips. We will be back here next Tuesday. Our intent is to be on at 11. Some days, because we have families too, it might be 12, but we will give you notice if we're going to be on at a different time. If you guys have topics that are hot for you and you want to hear more about them, please share that on our Facebook page or in YouTube comments. We really would like this to become a community-driven conversation. Any thoughts before we leave them, Sue?
No, have a great night.
Okay, thank you. Bye.